Welcome to Reformed Thinking. This is the Deep Dive.
This is where we take the source material that you send in and, well, we just drill down into it.
We try to get to the core of the ideas to get you well-informed and fast. And today, we're looking at something that gets right to the heart of our understanding of, well, the nature of man.
It's a serious one today. We're drawing on the classic theological writings of Charles Spurgeon.
Specifically, his notes on Psalm 53. They're found in his work, The Treasury of David.
Right, and Psalm 53 is just so interesting because it's a repeat.
It's almost a word-for-word copy of Psalm 14. You could easily just skip over it.
But Spurgeon says, no, you absolutely cannot do that. He sees it as, and I'm quoting here, another edition by the same author, emphasized in certain parts and rewritten for another purpose.
That repetition, that's the whole key here. So I think our mission for this deep dive is to use Spurgeon's analysis of this psalm to really grasp what the source material is saying about human depravity.
Yes, what he calls that mortal hereditary taint of sin. We want to see how this version of the psalm, the second edition, addresses practical atheism.
And why the only hope against this overwhelming corruption is framed as divine deliverance.
It really sets a sober tone from the very beginning.
It does. I mean, think about it. David lived a long life. He saw empires come and go. He dealt with humanity at its absolute best and its worst.
And at the end of all that, he felt the need to rewrite this exact message.
That says something, doesn't it? Something about how stubborn we are, how forgetful.
Spurgeon hits on that. He says the repetition is necessary because we are slow to learn and need line upon line.
So David, after all he's seen, concludes that men left to their own devices are morally no better at the end of his life than they were when he was just a kid.
And that initial context is so vital. It really pushes back against the common idea that humanity is sort of, generally improving on its own.
The idea that education or time or evolution will fix our moral problems.
Right. This material says the opposite. It says if you really observe the world over a long period, you find no inherent moral progress in mankind.
And that view, well, it sets the stage for a proper estimation of grace, doesn't it?
It has to. We need this lesson hammered home constantly because our default setting is always to downplay the severity of that universal hereditary corruption. We forget how bad the disease really is.
So let's start with that disease. Let's move right into the title of Psalm 53 itself. Compared to Psalm 14, this version has two additions in the superscription that Spurgeon spends a lot of time on.
Mahalath and Mashil.
What are these telling us right from the start?
Well, they're not just, little footnotes from music historians. Spurgeon sees them as instructions on how to read this and really how to feel about it.
Okay, so let's take the first one, Mahalath.
According to the notes, it's probably a musical direction. It's calling for a mournfully solemn air or maybe for a certain instrument to be prominent to create a specific mood.
But the word itself has a meaning, and it's the fascinating one. Mahalath, the source tells us, is a term that means disease.
Exactly. The musical instruction is directly connected to the content of the psalm. It's a lament. It's a solemn recognition of a profound sickness.
Which is why Spurgeon gives it his own subtitle.
He does. He calls it the song of man's disease, the mortal hereditary taint of sin.
So the diagnosis sets the melody. Before you even read a single word about the fool or the wicked, you're meant to understand that the subject here is a deep-seated universal sickness affecting the entire human race.
And then you get the second instruction, Mashil.
This one is described as a direction calling for double attention.
Double attention to this most instructive song. So this isn't a casual read. The text itself is telling you to lean in, to focus, because this is a critical lesson.
That instruction alone really reinforces the need for the repetition, doesn't it?
It does. The inspired writer is essentially telling the reader, stop. I know you read Psalm 14, but you clearly didn't grasp the gravity of the message.
So this second edition, this rewrite, demands you pay double attention. Because the instruction here, the depth of human sin, is absolutely essential to get right.
Which brings us back to the duplication itself. Why would the Holy Spirit preserve two versions of basically the same message? If we believe Scripture does nothing without a reason, there has to be a theological purpose for having two versions of this indictment.
And the sources offer some pretty robust analysis on that. Ryland, for instance, he has a hypothesis.
He does. He suggests the two Psalms might refer to different periods or maybe different aspects of God's dealings with humanity. He points out that Psalm 14 focuses heavily on judgment.
And he uses the name Jehovah.
Right. And in that context, Jehovah refers to the covenant God, the self-existent one who enters into a specific relationship with his people, Israel, and judges them based on the terms of that covenant.
So it puts a focus on Israel's immediate moral failure against their specific God.
Yes, but then Psalm 53 changes the name.
It does, and that's a huge shift.
A huge shift. Psalm 53 changes the focus to deliverance and God being in the midst of his people, and this is signaled by the repeated use of the name Elohim.
Wordsworth points out that Elohim appears 7 times in Psalm 53.
7 times. That slight change in name carries immense weight. It moves the perspective away from the specific covenant context of Jehovah to the broader, more universal perspective of God as the providential judge and the source of all might for all the redeemed.
So it's a shift in scope.
It is. So while the core description of human depravity stays identical, the people are still rotten, still foolish, the perspective changes. It's now about how God, the Elohim of the whole universe, and his redeemed children is sovereignly dealing with this problem.
It's about God's power to overcome the disease, not just the diagnosis of the disease itself.
You could almost say Psalm 14 is the diagnosis under the law, and Psalm 53 is the diagnosis under the promise of a rescue.
Alexander's hypothesis really supports that idea of a refinement. He suggested David deliberately rewrote it to strengthen certain points.
To make the variations stronger, bolder, really emphasizing the gravity of the original indictment.
And then Bonar gives us the final, sweeping theological reason for this repetition, this line upon line.
He says the goal is to impress upon us the enormous guilt, the inconceivable pollution, the ineffably provoking atheism of this fallen province of God's dominion.
That phrase, fallen province of God's dominion, is so powerful. It frames humanity's condition not just as a series of personal failures, but as a crisis of governance in God's own creation.
And Bonar says it is good to return now and then to that loathsome degradation where we were all found.
Why is that good? That sounds unpleasant.
Because it relates directly to the core of our faith, the absolute reality of total inability. We need constant, sharp reminders of the full extent of our corruption so that we never, even for a second, mistake ourselves as being neutral.
Or capable of contributing something good toward our own rescue.
Never. The two psalms together serve as dual mirrors. One shows the universal sin, the other emphasizes the particular divine solution, grace.
Okay, so the structure seems pretty clear then. First, you have to acknowledge the disease, that's Mahalath. Second, you have to pay attention to the instruction, that's Mashil.
And third, you see the comprehensive scope of God's solution, symbolized by the name Elohim.
If this repetition is so necessary to hammer home this doctrine of our universal corruption, let's see who the prime example of that corruption is. Let's start with verse 1, the fool.
Verse 1 really delivers the core indictment. The fool hath said in his heart, there is no God. And Spurgeon immediately defines this fool in the strongest possible terms. He's not just, intellectually confused.
No, the notes are very clear. It's a comprehensive deficiency. He is a fool in the heart as well as in the head, a fool in morals as well as in philosophy.
So this is a moral problem first and an intellectual problem second. The atheist, in this sense, is willfully lacking wisdom.
And the source material warns us that this denial isn't some quiet, static opinion he keeps to himself.
Not at all. The fool's progress is described with a string of really intense adjectives. Rapid, riotous, raving, ruinous.
The idea being that starting with impiety, with the denial of God, just prepares the way for anything and everything else that is wicked.
It's the first domino to fall. If the first principle of your life is the denial of the Creator, then logically every subsequent choice just flows downhill from there.
So what does the phrase, there is no God, when interpreted in Spurgeon's context, actually mean for society? What are the implications?
It means the entire moral structure collapses. The denial of a sovereign God is interpreted as meaning no law, no order, no restraint to lust, no limit to passion. If there is no ultimate authority, well then there is no ultimate boundary.
And the text asks, who but a fool would want that kind of anarchy?
Right. The notes project this idea forward. If this principle were applied globally, the world would become a bedlam, a madhouse, or even worse, what the source calls an aseldama.
A field of blood.
A field of blood. The stakes here are truly existential. The very fabric of society, however imperfectly it works, rests on some acknowledgement of law and order.
Which has to come from a belief in a higher authority.
It has to. To remove the ultimate authority is to invite social ruin and wholesale murder.
And this brings us to a really crucial distinction that the material makes. This isn't just about the person who officially calls themselves an atheist.
No, this is much broader. Spurgeon states that Every natural man is more or less a denier of God. Practical atheism is the religion of the race.
That is the essential insight, isn't it? Practical atheism, living as if God did not exist.
Regardless of what you might say you believe or what church you attend on Sunday, it's self-sufficiency, self-determination, and the assumption that you are the ultimate authority in your own life.
So if we were to update this definition for today, the fool isn't necessarily the philosophical skeptic debating online. It's simply the person who lives without reference to God.
The person who acts as if the rules don't apply to them, prioritizing their own comfort and desire above any divine mandate. That's the practical atheist.
And the sources go deep into analyzing the source of this denial. Is it an intellectual problem or a heart problem?
Francis Bacon provides a striking observation here. He says it is absolutely a heart problem. The fool doesn't think there is no God in some cold, detached process of judgment.
He says it in his heart.
He says it in his heart, and that's a huge difference. He says it because he wants it to be true.
He has a good will to be of that belief, as Bacon puts it.
Precisely. Because he recognizes that the existence of a holy sovereign God makes not for him. A just God is inconvenient. His demands get in the way of a person's desire for unrestrained passion and self-rule.
So the internal desire dictates the conclusion. It's a willful moral denial, not a logical error.
And Robert Murray M'Cheyne provides this truly visceral illustration of just how intense this internal rebellion, this hatred for God, really is.
A shocking quote.
It is. M'Cheyne says that the denial of God is the secret desire of every unconverted bosom. And to stress the extent of this hatred, he says that if the breast of God were within the reach of men, it would be stabbed 1,000,000 of times in one moment.
That language is just. It's designed to shock you, but it forces you to face the reality of the malice that's hidden in the human heart.
It's a hatred that wishes for the non-existence of God because God represents absolute holiness and justice, the two things the fool cannot stand.
And Spurgeon connects that malice directly to history.
He says, "We saw that murderous hatred demonstrated perfectly when God was manifest in the flesh. Christ, who was altogether lovely and holy, was taken by men and hung on a tree."
M'Cheyne argues that's exactly what men would do to God again if they had the chance.
Which is why the material rejects what it calls dainty dealing with the wicked.
Right. I wanted to ask about that phrase. The source rejects dainty dealing and insists the wicked are rotten. That's extreme language for a theological document. How does Spurgeon justify that kind of severity?
Because the denial of God is not a neutral state. The source doesn't praise them as sincere doubters or amiable thinkers. No, they are described as corrupt, are they? They are rotten.
It's an offensive, putrid sin.
The word corruption here means decay. Their moral nature is fouled, it's putrefying, because they've removed the anchor of existence, which is God himself.
And this internal corruption inevitably translates into external action. It's a direct cause and effect relationship that the psalmist is highlighting.
Yes, bad principles soon lead to bad lives. Those who have practically denied their maker will, as the source says, act abominably when it serves their turn.
So the denial and forgetfulness of God are identified as the essential source of the unrighteousness and crime we see in the world.
Left to itself, this no-God spirit would produce nothing but the most loathsome actions.
Which leads to that comprehensive universal indictment that closes the verse, "There is none that doeth good." And the source makes a point to say this accusation is made by one who knows what is in man.
It's essential to emphasize that. The verdict is sweeping, and it's without exception. If anyone tries to argue that there are, pockets of innate virtue left untouched by the fall,
Islands of moral excellence somewhere.
the text rejects that claim immediately. The one typical fool described in verse 1 is reproduced throughout the entire human race. Without divine intervention, every single person, every single nation has forgotten the right way.
So, we have the diagnosis, the disease of practical atheism, and the symptom universal corruption. Now, verse 2 gives us the objective context for this verdict. God's direct observation.
Yes, God looked down from heaven upon the children of men. And the source is clear. This isn't a quick, passive glance.
No, the notes describe it as a steadfast gaze from his all-surveying observatory. It's the full, comprehensive nature of omniscience focused entirely on humanity.
It's an audit.
An audit, I like that. So what exactly was he looking for during this audit?
Well, what's so striking is that the standard he was looking for was remarkably basic.
He wasn't looking for perfected holiness?
Not at all, or profound theological insight. He was looking for anyone who did understand, that did seek God. Just simple sincerity, a right desire, the very first steps toward recovery from the disease.
And the result of this divine survey, this all-seeing gaze that takes in all nations, all individuals, all hearts, and all the motives within those hearts.
The result is exactly the same as in verse 1. He found neither a clear head nor a clean heart among them all. The search yields nothing positive. Nothing.
And the source material is quick to dispense with all human speculation about virtue here.
Oh, absolutely. That's where we get that sharp dismissal of the supposed pure heathens and admirable savages.
Spurgeon says they do not appear to have been visible to the eye of omniscience.
He says they exist only in the realm of fiction, and this is a direct, necessary rejection of any philosophical system that says man, if just left uncorrupted by modern society, could achieve inherent virtue on his own.
The divine X-ray sees through that facade.
It does. If God's all-seeing eyes see no favorable sign, then we can be absolutely certain there is none to be found. That's the weight of the divine verdict on humanity's potential.
Then, verse 3 seems to intensify the indictment, especially in how it describes the retreat from God. In Psalm 14, they turn aside. But here, the language is stronger.
Much stronger. Every one of them has gone back.
And that's a crucial refinement David makes in this new edition.
It is. Turning aside could suggest you just wandered off the path by mistake. Going back implies a definitive conscious retreat. You're running in a diametrically opposite direction.
So it highlights that the unregenerate life isn't just negligent toward God's law.
No, it's in direct defiance of the law of God. It's actively opposed to it.
And this active opposition results in that pervasive, undeniable moral pollution. They are altogether become filthy. We should probably pause on this imagery because the language used in the notes it's visceral.
It's meant to be. It's designed to shock any lingering sentimentality right out of us.
It feels like it.
The imagery is one of decay and disgust. Adam Clarke, one of the commentators, notes the original Hebrew signifies they have become sour and rancid.
Like milk that's gone bad.
Exactly, a metaphor for something that has fermented and turned worthless. It's spoiled, useless, even harmful. And Morrison, another commentator, strengthens this, suggesting the word could even be read as rotten or putrid.
So the entire mass of humanity is described as, and I'm quoting, soured with an evil leaven, fouled with an all-pervading pollution, made rank with general putrefaction. Why is it so crucial for the language to be this repulsive?
Because it forces you to confront the nature of sin, not just as a list of rules you broke, but as a total state of being. It's a rottenness that permeates everything.
It confirms that man's atheistic nature is not the mild error that we think it to be.
No, it's an abominable evil. The world might look fair and decent to human eyes, but to the all-seeing Elohim, it is defined by this pervasive rot. This is the heart of the doctrine of total inability, the understanding that all our faculties, our desires, our entire being are tainted by sin.
And the conclusion is confirmed yet again, just to drive the point home. There is none that doeth good, no, not one. This is the theological capstone, isn't it? It's necessary for understanding redemption.
It is. It emphasizes that the fallen race, if it's left to its own energy, has not produced and will not ever produce a single lover of God or doer of holiness.
The evidence from the divine survey is complete.
And the necessary intervention is clear. Grace must interpose. Without sovereign divine action, no specimen of humanity will ever pursue what is good and true on their own.
This leads to the necessity of seeking God, which Peter Martyr addresses, even while recognizing that God is everywhere. I mean, why must God be sought if he's already everywhere?
That's a great question. And Martyr explains that it's because the darkness which compasseth our minds through original sin hinders us. The corruption acts as a shroud.
So we're blinded.
We're blinded. He says the flesh, the senses, and earthly affections do hinder us from knowing of him, yea, though he be present. The moral rot blinds us to the one thing we need most. Our natural state prevents us from even apprehending God as our highest good.
And Tholuck provides a kind of systematic progression of how this works in practice.
Yes. Tholuck shows the chain reaction of depravity, the lack of understanding, the unclear head, inevitably leads to not seeking God. Because only those with clear insight recognize him as their highest possession.
And not seeking leads to estrangement.
To being gone aside, which then results in the individual becoming filthy or worthless. This whole cycle just confirms the principle that virtue only flows from communion with God. Without that initial desire, that first moment of understanding, the decay is inevitable and total.
We have established the disease and the total corruption. Now we get into verse 4, which details the symptom in action.
Yeah.
The sheer illogical cruelty of the wicked. The psalmist asks this question: have the workers of iniquity no knowledge?
It's a rhetorical question, of course.
Right. They lack wisdom, but shouldn't even common knowledge, common sense, restrain them from certain actions?
The question is highlighting the sheer folly and the self-destructiveness of sin. I mean, even basic worldly knowledge should teach them that sin is an evil thing, and that persecution, historically, usually recoils upon a man's own head.
But they're so far gone in their delusion, they don't even know they are their own enemies and are ruining themselves.
Their foolishness is total, and this lack of fundamental wisdom immediately manifests in their actions against God's people.
Who eat up my people as they eat bread.
This is one of the most chilling images in the entire psalm. It's describing casual cruelty.
The French margin note in the source material really clarifies this horrific imagery.
It says they have no more scruple in doing this than in eating a morsel of bread. It's not some grand ceremonial violence. It's the nonchalant, daily, bestial nature of their antagonism toward the spiritual seed. It is normalized malice.
The normalcy of it is what's so disturbing. They treat the righteous God's chosen people as a mere food source, a daily sustenance, a matter of habit and appetite.
And the source material immediately issues a solemn warning about the consequence of this habit. Spurgeon notes that such food will be hard to digest.
This casual consumption of the saints will bring on a horrible vomit when God deals with them in justice.
That is a sharp physical metaphor for divine judgment, isn't it? They may devour the saints now, assuming they have total ease and immunity, but divine judgment ensures that their cruelty will lead to a disastrous, painful, internal reckoning.
And this casual destruction is often driven by a kind of malicious jealousy.
Like Ishmael's opposition to Isaac, the natural man envying those who obtain mercy through grace.
Which brings us to the profound paradox that immediately follows in the second half of the verse. They have not called upon God. This feels like the peak of their illogical defiance.
It really is. They will use every earthly resource, every conspiracy, every physical means in their cruel enterprises to destroy the righteous.
Every means except the essential one, seeking God's favor or mercy. They are perfectly consistent in their practical atheism.
It's just sheer hypocrisy and malice. They actively devour those who pray the saints out of spiritual jealousy, yet they themselves refuse to seek the mercy and sustenance that only God can provide.
It's truly playing the dog in the manger, as the source says, envying others' blessing while refusing the source of that blessing for themselves.
And Goodwin offers a powerful explanation for why, if their nature is so rotten and their denial so complete, they don't simply eat up everyone and everything all the time. He introduces the idea of conscience.
The garrison planted in a rebellious town.
What a great phrase. This internal knowledge, however suppressed it might be, acts as a check. It rules and tames men, overcoming them with a certain fear that prevents total, unbridled societal collapse.
So if they had absolutely no knowledge, if that garrison was completely absent,
Goodwin argues they would eat up one another and the church as bread. It is only restraining grace that prevents the full, logical conclusion of atheism from manifesting everywhere, all the time.
This verse, they have not called upon God, also allows for a critical digression on the sin of omission, which Beveridge highlights. The failure to pray isn't just a neutral act.
No, it is a serious, damning sin in and of itself.
And Beveridge defines this sin in two ways. There's neglect, and then there's improper practice.
Right. Neglect is failing in public prayer, private devotion, or family prayer. These are the basic disciplines of just acknowledging God's sovereignty.
But improper practice is just as insidious.
Absolutely. To call upon God requires reverence, understanding, submission, believing faith, and sincerity. If a person just goes through the motions of prayer without those 5 elements, they are, in effect, still refusing to truly call upon God.
And Beveridge also stresses the necessity of constancy.
Always being in a praying frame, taking all occasions to pray, and letting no day slip without prayer.
So the failure to pray, whether in form or in spirit, demonstrates the deepest possible level of practical atheism. It's the refusal to acknowledge the need for essential, life-giving communication with the Creator.
They are consuming the saints while starving themselves. It's the ultimate folly.
So we shift now. We've gone through the dark diagnosis of man's depravity and cruelty, and now we get to the inevitable conclusion, the certainty of God's judgment and the promise of deliverance. Verse 5 is David's vision of the end of the ungodly.
There were they in great fear where no fear was.
The contrast is so jarring. The cruel, fearless boasters who are casually devouring the saints are suddenly seized with a causeless panic.
They tremble like the leaves of the aspen, frightened by nothing external but by their own shadows.
And the source material is clear that this fear is God's just judgment.
It is. Givens asks the central question. Behold how fearful a hell a wounded conscience is.
Those who refuse to fear the Lord, who deny his existence and authority, are made to stand in fear of things that are justly no cause of fear. The internal garrison of conscience turns into a hellish prison.
And this moment of panic exposes the true nature of infidelity, which the notes identify as cowardice.
So the atheist is, at bottom, a coward.
That's what the source says. His denial is just whistling in the dark to keep his courage up against the overwhelming reality of his own guilt. When divine judgment finally arrives, that philosophical facade just crumbles instantly, and the internal reckoning, the wounded conscience, is unleashed.
This panic is rooted in divine contempt and victory. The collapse of the wicked is described in these very physical terms. For God hath scattered the bones of him that encampeth against thee.
The mighty hosts, the armies that set themselves against God and his people, are utterly defeated. The sight of their unburied carcasses, their scattered bones, serves as absolute proof of God's prowess against those who dare to deny his being. It's a powerful warning.
And the defeat isn't just physical destruction. It's followed by a deep, searing shame. That has put them to shame because God has despised them.
The persecutors and the deniers spent their time scoffing at God's people, assuming they held the upper hand.
But now God's people may laugh them to scorn with far greater justification.
Because the Lord considers their enemies less than nothing in vanity. Their destruction is utterly humiliating because it's ratified by divine contempt. They weren't even given the dignity of a fight. They were simply scorned and scattered.
The psalm then closes, finally, by turning our eyes away from the scene of judgment and toward the future hope. The final petition is so fervent and personal.
Oh, that the salvation of Israel were come out of Zion.
This is the longing for the final, total deliverance.
The end of the long oppression and the full realization of the promises made by Elohim. What's interesting is the Hebrew word for salvation here is actually in the plural.
And the source suggests that denotes its greatness.
Its greatness and its comprehensive nature. Not just one single deliverance, but a gathering of all the benefits of salvation. It's a heartfelt wish for the final battle to be over and for the Lord to avenge and restore his elect.
And the result of this restoration will be universal, complete joy. Jacob shall rejoice, and Israel shall be glad.
The happiness of that liberty, of that restoration, will be directly proportional to the heaviness of the yoke they bore under the persecution of the wicked.
And Spurgeon, writing from his own historical context, draws the line of expectation forward from this.
He does. He connects this hope specifically toward the second advent and the restoration of Israel.
So the entire trajectory of this deep dive is complete. We went from the diagnosis of the disease, the Mahalath, through the depths of human corruption and atheistic malice, only to end with this confident expression of future hope in God's intervention.
Establishing him as the Redeemer of his people, the emphasis from start to finish is entirely on the certainty of divine action.
This focused analysis of Spurgeon's notes on Psalm 53 has certainly reaffirmed a stark, uncompromising perspective on human nature. But it also, I think, gives us a clear reason for hope.
It has. This study solidified the comprehensive moral corruption of man, that mortal taint, which requires nothing less than sovereign intervention.
Grace must interpose.
It has to, because left to its own energy, humanity only produces corruption, rancid thoughts, and abominable actions, especially cruel persecution.
And we clarified that the nature of atheism is fundamentally moral. It's rooted in the heart's desire to deny God for the sake of passion, which leads inevitably to that casual eating up of God's people.
It's a hatred of the good that is both self-destructive and outwardly malicious.
And finally, the text confirms the certainty of divine deliverance. God sees all. He judges the ungodly, and he causes the wicked to scatter in terror, proving that their denial of him was the height of folly and cowardice.
And their eternal shame is rooted in his absolute contempt for their rebellion.
So what does this all mean for us today? If the divine verdict, after that steadfast gaze from heaven, remains, none that doeth good, no, not one. What practical daily effect should the knowledge that we are only saved and sustained by grace have on our self-perception and our relationships?
Well, it raises a really important question that builds on the necessity of this repetition. If the whole mass of humanity, and that includes our own fallen natures, is defined by the source material as being filthy, sour, and rancid.
What beverage called the greatest nastiness in the world?
Yes. How should that understanding temper our own pride and our own ambition? We are so constantly prone to forgetting the source of any goodness in us.
So for the listener, what's the takeaway thought?
Consider the nature of sin, not just as transgression, not just as breaking a rule, but as this deep inherent nastiness. And think about how that realization should fuel our daily, relentless pursuit of true, operative holiness, knowing that any perceived good thing we accomplish is purely attributable to God's restraining and saving grace. That's something essential to think on long after this deep dive is complete.
A compelling and necessary truth to close with. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.
We'll see you next time.